we didn't get kicked off Instagram at the hour mark as you usually do, but as a result, we couldn't save it, so we couldn't upload it. So if you weren't there live in the chat, then you would have missed out. And it was a pretty good chat, but we will do more chats like that, more lives. So yeah, stick around, watch this space. I'll be hopefully doing one with another friend of mine this week, just trying to tee that up. And we'll be hopefully talking more Ukraine stuff and then world situation. All right, so I've got YouTube up and running now. So this is the SitRep for 28th February 2022. Got a bunch of stuff that's come out overnight that's really interesting. Been chatting to somebody, a mate who's over in the general area of Eastern Europe, and very, very cluey person, finger on the pulse of what's going on and can figure out what's going on as well. Very intelligent individual who's give me a few heads up on what the feeling is over there. So I'll have a little bit of a chat about that too. All right, so I'll start off with the Ukraine situation of what's been happening overnight, and the Russia situation, like the sort of fallout of what's going on over there. And in no particular order. So Financial Times is reporting a lot of Russian ATM queues. So a lot of people are freaking out and they're going for cash at the moment. That came up in the chat last night. We were talking about, what sort of stuff do you want to do with your money if it's in electronic form, which most of our cash is at the moment. It's in electronic form sitting in the bank. And we've seen, for a number of reasons, but this crisis in particular, how quickly that can be disrupted. So even something as simple as a major power outage, a cyber attack, a external conflict and sanctions being placed, or within our own government, i.e. what happened in Canada, we can see that our access to that, our own money, can be turned off very quickly. So consider having some cash on hand, consider pulling out cash now. So in Russia, what's happening, there's videos coming out of these huge lines, and actually reminds me of the good old days when Russia was having like bread lines and things like that back in communist Russia era. So you can see these people just lined up waiting to get to an ATM to get cash out so they can actually buy something. Their banking system obviously being absolutely smashed at the moment by the international community. And if you haven't heard, one of the main mechanisms for moving money around the world is called the SWIFT system. And as part of the sanction package, a number of countries have now signed off on turning that system off, or not allowing certain Russian banks to access that system, and that's a pretty big deal. They won't be able to essentially they won't be able to do anything. So it's one of the most effective sanctions to be placed upon those banking systems within Russia. Belarus has started making sounds that they might be joining in now. So for those who don't know, Belarus, the large country that sits directly to the north of Ukraine, is, you could kind of call it a puppet state of Russia. I'm pretty sure, actually, like, somebody might be able to confirm or deny this, but Belarus means, the actual word means Little Russia. But I don't know. It kind of makes sense in my head, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But Belarus has started to make moves within their government to perhaps declare war on Ukraine. So they're going to join in, because as of yet, they haven't officially joined in. They just allow Russia to launch from their state. A few countries apparently have been coming out and supporting people going into the country and fighting for Ukraine. So this has been confirmed. The Independent was reporting from Britain that their foreign secretary was saying that they unconditionally support individual British people with military training to go in and fight with Ukraine if that's what they want to do. They're not saying yes, you should do it, but they're not saying don't go over there. And that's usually what we see, like with conflicts like this overseas, that and countries that aren't actually involved in it usually say to their citizens, like, don't go over there. It's not a great idea. But apparently, British Foreign Secretary is saying thumbs up. There's unconfirmed reporting that Denmark has also said the same, but that I actually got from RT. So RT is a Russian news agencies. So just so you know, I do try and seek out Russian sources of information as well, for as long as I can, because I think they're probably going to get switched off. And just on that RT in particular, and Sputnik. So these are Russian sources of information. Russian news agencies have overnight been getting shut down everywhere. So the EU has come out and said, "Yep, Sputnik RT, you cannot report here anymore." A lot of the channels that have been carrying them, even within Australia, I think it might be Foxtel that carries RT, has just turned it off. Me personally, I think that's a terrible idea. I don't think we should be doing that. Yes, they're propaganda channels, or can be utilized as propaganda channels. I don't think that's a reason to turn that stuff off. I think that's problematic for a number of reasons. It's, in my view, I always think it's better to at least know if they're putting out BS, at least know the BS that your enemy is putting out. It's, I mean, this is kind of like a psychotherapy type thing as well. And, more Jungian, Carl Jung sort of psychotherapy. We're talking about the shadow side of the human psyche. Everything that you push down and you deny and you push down into that shadow, you can't see it. And then it can do whatever it wants out there. So if we're switching off those channels and we're not looking at them, that means they can kind of start really ramping up propaganda. They can start doing stuff, and we don't see it. We're not aware of what they're doing. And the first casualty of war is always truth. So who's to say that our side's not doing propaganda? In fact, they are doing propaganda. So at least you get a broad spectrum of propaganda when you get to see everyone else. So yeah, that's happening with the Russian news sources, RT being switched off. Still there on Telegram. So if you are interested in looking at the Russian side of house, then you can go look at it there. But Telegram itself is a Russian entity. So who knows how long we'll have access to that. So we're seeing this sort of stuff here go on. British people saying, "Yep, go." If you're British, you've got military training, and you feel the need to go over and fight with Ukraine, go for it. That's your choice, which I find a very libertarian view. So good on them. Airspace around Europe has been almost unanimously shut off to Russia. So I just before jumping on here, it was one of the last things I looked at was one of the maps, and it's just red everywhere, with a couple of kind of little dots of green. The major one probably being Turkey down to the south. But Finland closed off their airspace overnight, or this morning, Australian time. So that's, and then that spreads all the way out west. Iceland has done it, Greenland's done it, US has done it, Canada's done it. So it's getting hard for Russia to fly around at the moment, or impossible really to fly through that space there. Okay, the big stuff that's come out that really piqued my interest, that has really instigated me wanting to put out this SitRep this morning, is that Putin has ordered his nuclear deterrent forces to go onto alert. So he's upped the level there, and that's interesting. That's kind of displaying to the world that there is a readiness, or at least it's in his thought pattern there, that nuclear weapons are an option. And if you've listened to me rant on about this in any of my previous ones, you'll know that I consider this like one of the most horrific possibilities that we can think of. Because if that genie gets let out of the bag, then who knows where that's going to go. I doubt, though, if it was to be used, I doubt that it would not be responded in kind by someone like the US. So, yeah, watch that space. Bated breath. That's one that concerns me a lot. For those who don't know, like I was talking about this with someone recently, and they were like, "Oh, well, is that the end of the world then?" It's not the end of the world. I mean, it potentially could be that sort of level of catastrophic effect, but a nuke going off isn't instantaneously the end of the world. How a nuke affects an area has a lot of variables, and it mainly to do with the size of the actual explosive that's dropped, but also like predominant winds and things like that, rubble, waterways, all the geography, location, and weather patterns are going to affect what the actual fallout is. But it's not like a nuke gets dropped and then the world is over. It's not even like 10 nukes get dropped and the world is over, but it starts to get that way. But just to illustrate the magnitude of what the problem could be there, we're talking about Russia and the US, who have predominantly the most nukes, and we're talking in the order of thousands of nuclear weapons that they have at their disposal. So that's an issue. What else have we got in here? And just staying in this area as well, as I was saying, I was talking to a contact that I have who's in the area, and I find also extremely cluey individual. So they have their finger on the pulse. They're not in the country itself. They're not in Ukraine, but they are in the area. And they were talking about the situation, and I'm not going to go into specifics or anything, but it definitely does feel like it's starting to escalate there in the wider area. So the surrounding countries that are happening there, it does look like, issues. People are starting to make plans. There's a lot of going on there. I just read that, again, unconfirmed, this one, but Kosovo may have asked for an expedited process to be included into the NATO plans, and allegedly asked US to put a base there. And I can't confirm the source, and I have a feeling that where I'm getting it from is Russian sources as well. So this could be total propaganda, this one, but that is interesting, because that's really starting to change the shape and the face of Europe as a whole. If we're looking at Kosovo and that area as well, Kosovo's had its own problems. Serbia and that area is still not officially sorted. Like, the dust really hasn't settled from their issues that they've had there. So the fact that they're asking for US bases, sorry, not the fact, the possibility that they're asking for US bases in there is kind of a big deal. So back onto conversations I've been having with people on the ground there. We're talking this morning about the religious side, or the spiritual side of this, and this is actually quite a big deal. This person sent me an article that I read that linked to a few other articles in reputable sources that actually highlight how this might be either moving into, or could have been the whole time, motivated from a very spiritual source, that being Russian Orthodox Christianity and what's happening there, and a deep history of what's going on. So, people who are kind of thinking, well, I'm thinking historically here, and I think Russia wants to reclaim its USSR roots. This could go much beyond that. In fact, the USSR did a good job of demolishing what the Russian Empire, or the Russian Orthodox Church had set up there. And so this could actually be a return to that sort of side of things, being that, there's ties in there with the Holy Roman Empire, I guess, with the, kind of the Pope side of things. And when that split up, then Russia being seen as another sort of bastion of that, obviously in a slightly different denomination, but that's there are links there that go back to like 1988. 988. So 1,000-year-old sort of movements that are going on there, and that Vladimir Putin may be actually motivated much more by this spiritual side of things than we realize. So what actually got reported in news overnight that piqued my interest into this, and then obviously I got filled in a bit further by this contact, was that I guess what you could call the head, the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, had come out and is basically saying, like, this war is, I don't want to say the holy war, because that's putting words in their mouth, but that's what it looks like. And my take on that is that's some dangerous space to be in. As somebody who has fought in Afghanistan, and I know what religious fervor brings to a war, at least on one side of it, that opens up a spectrum of danger, of chaos, I guess, in there that's far beyond a land grab. So if we're looking at it and going like, oh yeah, Putin's just trying to like get resources or oil or wheat, probably more mainly through the Ukraine and secure pipelines coming out of Russia of natural gas, that's one thing. And if you're playing on that side of things, then you think, well, if that's what he's after, then if we sanction and we do these financial things, then that's obviously going to bring them back into the fold. But then if we bring in the element of spiritual sort of side of things, this religious side of things, that throws all that out the window as far as I'm concerned. No amount of sanctions is no amount of financial sanctioning is going to disrupt that. If he has a plan to take Kiev, which they have said is part of Russia and Russia's destiny, I guess, Russia's spiritual destiny. So this is the kind of languaging that's coming out that's very disturbing. So that's the situation there that I'm seeing. Watch that space, but that's a pretty big development. Those two things: this spiritual element of it coming in, and the N word, the nuclear option being tossed around there. Both disturbing to me. Both could lead into bigger things. In our neck of the woods, or in our close neighborhood, South China Sea sort of stuff, I haven't actually seen any reporting overnight come out. What have we got on the major sites here? Nothing. I mean, Brisbane's still getting pummeled with rain. I got some photos from a friend who lives up in Brisbane of his jet ski parked at his front steps to his house. So that's the amount of rain. That's the amount of rain they've got there. Amount of water. New South Wales is about to cop it as well, by the looks of it. Especially northern New South Wales has been getting pretty wet up there. But yeah, we've most of the news sources are really focused on what's going on here, especially Belarus possibly joining and the nuclear threat. So that's what we've got in that situation. The only other thing I really wanted to touch on was something that piqued my interest. It's a report that came out from the CDC in the US. So the US CDC, the Center for Disease Control, actually withheld data on the effectiveness of, jab-jabs that are going on at the moment. Which, I mean, I'm not getting into the argument of effectiveness of these things at all. It's the actual withholding of information that I find particularly offensive. Freedom of speech is one thing, but what's actually happening here? Their quote was, they didn't release this information because they might be misinterpreted as the vaccine being ineffective. So effectiveness aside, taking that out of the conversation here, they might be misinterpreted. So they're looking at, okay, should we put this information out? No, that could be. I think that could be misinterpreted by people down the road, and it could be used for maybe increased vaccine hesitancy or whatever. That should never be the role of CDC. CDC is a scientific organization. Science is a tool of measurement. Science measures. Scientists report measurements. That's what science should be doing. It shouldn't be restricting any of that information. If they see something, they should be like, here's what we see. That second and third order effect where they're looking and going, I think people might interpret this as something else, or it's not the role of a scientist to look at what somebody might do with that information, or how they might feel about that information, or how they might act on that information. This I think is particularly offensive, and I think people should be looking at this sort of stuff and trying to find where freedom of speech or free speech or information is being repressed, because this is just one example of how it's happened recently, and really try and fight against this in some way. Try and seek out this information anyway. And this links back to what I was saying about RT and Sputnik news agencies being banned. Yes, all right, they're the enemy, they're the bad guys, and what they're saying is utter crap, and it's all geared towards Russian stuff. In reality, if you're actually reading this stuff, they're not sitting there going like, rah, rah, Russia, we are right, and we are perfect, and everything's great. You know, they do have some level of balanced reporting, and they are trying to fact check some stuff. You just have to realize where that is coming from. So, yeah, again, the fact that EU shut down RT, you know, most people aren't going to get access to that side of the Russian propaganda machine. You know, we only get the Western propaganda machine. I find it kind of offensive, and it's disturbing to me that this habit that we're starting to fall into of this restriction of information. But then again, you know, I also assume that people are rational human beings who can look at and decide and weigh information on their own behest and under their own steam. And I might be totally delusional in thinking that. But that's the way that I try and do things. I try and find as many sources of information as I can and collect as much information as I can, and then weigh all that information and process that accordingly. So that's what I'm seeing in the world today. That's the SitRep as I'm looking at it, 28th February 2022. If there's any questions, feel free to pump them in. Again, I do apologize if you didn't get to see the live last night that we did. The person who had it on there is Lauren, that Insta chick. Her phone had a glitch in it, so who knows? Maybe it was a cyber attack. Maybe it was the deep state taking it away. But either way, we couldn't save that file, so you can't go back and rewatch it. It was a one and done. You were there or you were not there, and it was beautiful. It was one of the most perfect things ever. And I'll never repeat most of the things that I said there. No, I'm just joking. I will repeat that stuff. We will do another one sometime soon, probably in a week or so. But yeah, so keep your eye on what's going on there, what's happening in Europe. So a question just came in. Have a mate who has to travel to Holland for work soonish. Thoughts on travel to Europe at the moment? I mean, the situation, and this is through my source, the situation in Europe is becoming increasingly, I don't want to say dire, but unpredictable would be probably a better way to put it. And I'll use their words in that it doesn't matter if you're right up against where the conflict is, it's going to be all of Europe. So, you know, the difference between being here in Europe and I'm in Italy, it's safe, or I'm in Holland, it's safe. No, like if something spills out there, then that entire area, that entire continent, I would say is unsafe. So my main tip would be build escape plans. And this is one of the things I always teach in my courses and stuff like that. An exit plan is one of the things you always want to have. And when I think about exit plans, I think from micro to macro. So I go into a room and I think, right, where is the entry point and where's my main egress point? Right, it's there. Where's an alternative exit point from this room? Okay, maybe there. What about a contingency or an emergency one? Okay, maybe through the window. Maybe I can use this fire hose here, smash out the window and jump out Die Hard style. So I think about that. How do I get out of the room? Then how do I get out of this building? Then how do I get out of this area, like around the building? How do I get out of this block? How do I get out of this suburb? How do I get out of this city if I need to escape or evacuate the city? How do I get out of this country all the way back to either a safe point that I've designated or back to home, you know, back to Australia? So have that plan, and don't just have one plan and then that's it. Have multiple exit routes and be monitoring the situation constantly. So if I was going over to Europe, and if I could, I would be, I can tell you that, because I've got a number of job offers and interesting little offers to go over there, but I definitely would, but I'm not allowed to for certain reasons. So if I was going over there, I would definitely have a very solid plan. I would be not assuming anything. I'd be like, yeah, I'll just hire a car, and if something went wrong, I'd drive through this checkpoint and I'd get on a plane here. I would be making sure that I knew exactly that. I would be talking to people on the ground. I'd be like, hey, is this checkpoint open still? Hey, can I buy tickets on this airline and just have, tickets that I can move around, so that, if something does happen and I rock up there, I can go, oh, hey, I've got this ticket. Can I just shift it to the next flight out, please? And I'd have multiple forms of exit as well. I wouldn't just be relying on plane. I would be looking at trains. I would be looking at automobiles. I would be looking at ships, so waterway exits, and I would be looking at can I move on foot as well to get to where I need to go. And have a grab bag, and do not let that grab bag outside of the distance of your arm. So I've got giant monkey arm. Sorry, people can't see that on the screen, but do not let that bag outside of your the distance that you can grab it. It is a grab bag for a reason. That's what we call it. So that would be my recommendation. Feel free to pass that on to them. If anyone else got recommendations, feel free to chuck them in as well. But yeah. I wouldn't not go to Europe right now, but that depends on your situation. And again, this is me. I wouldn't not go to Europe. If you're in a different situation, if you maybe, I don't know, your health status is different, you've got some sort of extant or existing or pre-existing conditions or something like that, I might start to reconsider it. But yeah, if you're fit, healthy, and able to handle yourself in an emergency situation, then go for it. Ask them to pick you up something nice while they're there. Cool. All right. So unless there's any other questions, I will wrap it up there. Feel free to shoot any questions through to me on the DMs. But I've got to shoot off. I've got stuff that I do things apart from just sit there and stare at the internet and make videos all day. I do sometimes do stuff as well. So I'll keep monitoring stuff. If anything changes in the next 12 hours, I'll try and get another video up. But apart from that, I might leave it till tomorrow, but who knows what's going to happen. The situation is rapidly changing over there. And as new information comes in, it changes the entire picture that we have. So thanks again, everyone, for joining in. Thanks for the questions into seeing 1908. I always have to lean in. Is it 1906 or 1908? Right. 1908. Always appreciate it. Always appreciate everyone being on here on the Instagram and the YouTubes. Until next time, stay safe, stay warm and dry if you're up north of Australia at the moment. Keep preparing, and Semper Paratus.